The climb began with Neo. I took the blessing that leaves enemies in the next 3 combats at a single hit point, choosing immediate tempo over the quieter maximum health bonus. That set up an aggressive opening route through Act 1 and let Ironclad keep all of his starting health intact. The first room was a quick pair of louses, both reduced to a single hit point by Neo's blessing. I cleaned them up with 2 strikes before they could matter, pocketed 17 gold, and took a cultist potion for future scaling. On the card reward, I snapped up Carnage to give the deck a much more threatening Act 1 damage ceiling. The first event room turned into the accursed blacksmith. I dug through the forge and accepted the risky line, taking warp tongs at the price of a pain curse. That is a powerful early relic for Ironclad, and because a merchant was immediately ahead on the map, the curse looked temporary rather than permanent. The merchant room was all about damage control after the forge gamble. I entered the shop, spent 75 gold to remove pain immediately, and declined to clutter the deck with weak filler just because something was affordable. That left me with a cleaner list, warp tongs intact, and Neo's blessing still partially active for the next combats. The next question mark flipped into a cultist fight, but Neo's lament still had a charge to spare. Warp tongs upgraded one of my strikes at the start of combat, then a single attack ended the room before the bird could start chanting. I collected 18 gold, added a colorless potion, and took Pommel Strike to smooth out the draws and keep the deck moving. I checked the second merchant carefully before the elite, hoping for a high-impact pickup. The inventory was mostly low-value filler and unaffordable premium options, so I chose discipline over impulse and left with my gold untouched. The important part was that the final charge of Neo's blessing remained lined up for the next combat. The route paid off perfectly. Neo's final blessing charge carried into a sentry's elite, dropping all 3 machines to a single hit point at the start. I still had to spend 1 extra turn because my opening hand could not kill the full trio immediately, but the elite was functionally solved before it began and cost me no health. The payoff was excellent. 26 gold, Mercury Hourglass for passive chip damage every turn, a fairy in a bottle for emergency insurance, and Flame Barrier to strengthen the deck against Act 1 pressure in later multi-hit fights. The Jawworm was the first fight of the run that actually had to be played straight. Mercury Hourglass chipped it on entry. Warp Tongs upgraded both Pommel Strike and then Carnage over the course of the combat, and Flame Barrier absorbed the opening 11 damage swing while reflecting damage back. On the following turn, a freshly upgraded Carnage closed the fight cleanly. I took the 10 gold and skipped a weak card reward to preserve deck quality. The Floor 8 fight was a large spike slime, and this one required some care. Mercury Hourglass opened the combat with passive damage. Then Carnage took a huge chunk without forcing an awkward early split. After the slime licked me with Frail, I pushed it the rest of the way down and split it into 2 mediums at a manageable health total. Pommel Strike picked off the attacker, and 2 more strikes finished the last slime before it could matter. I left with 18 gold and added Metallicize, another solid tool for long boss and heart-style fights. The chest room forced the first real heart route decision. Inside was White Beast Statue, a relic that would have guaranteed potion flow for the rest of the run, but I passed it up and claimed the Sapphire Key instead. That locked in the blue key requirement early and removed future ambiguity from the route. The late Act 1 slime gang was messy, but controlled. 5 small slimes attacked at once, so I leaned on Flame Barrier plus upgraded Defend to blunt the opening burst and let the thorns chip the whole board. On the next turn I used Bash and a strike to remove most of the attackers, though 1 surviving spike slime still slipped through for 5 damage before Mercury Hourglass cleaned the field down to a final easy execution. Burning Blood patched the chip damage right back up after the fight. I took 12 gold and added a second Flame Barrier, doubling down on a defensive card that remains excellent against Swarms, Hexahost, and the Heart. The question mark room broke in my favor and turned into another chest instead of a fight or event. That chest held Kunai, which is a premium pickup for a heart route because it converts repeated attack turns into permanent dexterity inside combat. With Mercury Hourglass already helping to clean up small enemies, Kunai opened the door to a much stronger late-game defensive engine. The second elite was Lagavulin, and it turned into the run's first truly consequential fight. I used the free sleeping turn to drink a cultist potion, then woke it with a heavy Carnage into Pommel Strike. Once the fight was live, I chose to race through its huge Metallicize instead of turtling forever, spending health to land 3 attacks in 1 turn, trigger Kunai for dexterity, and keep vulnerable on the target. That aggressive line let me finish Lagavulin with a second Carnage before the strength-draining debuff cycle could start. The reward haul was excellent. 32 gold, potion belt for 2 extra slots, fruit juice which I drank immediately for +5 max HP and +5 current HP, and no card pickup from a weak reward set. The World of Goop event offered a blunt trade. Money now or blood now. With Arrest still on the path and Hexacoast generally less punishing when Ironclad is not overhealed, I reached back into the slime and took the 75 gold for 11 HP. It was painful, but it set up a much stronger Act 2 economy. The final hallway fight before the campfire was a red slaver, and it played out in 2 awkward but manageable phases. I opened with Carnage plus Block to soften the first 13 damage hit, then used Metallicize and cheap attacks on the debuff turn to set up a cleaner finish. When the slaver tried to swing again while I was entangled, Flame Barrier Plus turned that restriction into an advantage. I blocked comfortably and the reflected damage finished the fight for me. Burning Blood healed some of the chip damage afterward and I took 10 gold plus Uppercut, a high-quality boss card. At the campfire, I chose to smith instead of rest. The health total was low enough that Hexacoast opening Barrage should stay manageable, and the deck benefited more from improving quality than from simply climbing back toward full life. I upgraded Uppercut, turning it into a much stronger source of weak and vulnerable for the coming boss fight. Hexacoast turned into a drawn-out survival fight, but the decision to stay relatively low on life at the campfire paid off immediately. The opening 6-hit barrage was reduced to 4x6, and both copies of Flame Barrier did enormous work by turning those multi-hit patterns back against the boss. From there, the fight became a balance between applying pressure and managing the relentless stream of burns. Uppercut Plus kept key windows under control with weak and vulnerable. Metallicize chipped in every turn, and Kunai rewarded the turns where I could still chain multiple attacks together. The middle of the fight was tense. Several turns came down to sequencing block and damage carefully enough to survive the burns without surrendering all momentum. In the end, Hexacoast dropped into range, and 3 upgraded strikes punched through its final block to finish the act. I walked away with 102 gold, chose Immolate from the rare reward for a huge Act 2 power spike, and took Coffee Dripper as the boss relic to gain a 4th energy each turn at the cost of giving up resting at campfires. Act 2 opened against a Chosen, and the new energy relic made the first turn feel dramatically different from Act 1. I paired Carnage with Flame Barrier Plus to erase the opening attack and punish the bird on both hits, then followed with 3 attacks on its debuff turn to trigger Kunai and keep the pressure high. Immolate showed its value immediately as a brutal mid-fight damage spike, and once Chosen was softened up, the rest of the combat was cleanup. Burning Blood restored the lost health afterward. I collected 13 gold, picked up a speed potion, and skipped a weak card reward. The next hallway fight was a trio of birds, which could have been awkward if the deck did not already have the right tools. I chipped one bird with Pommel Strike, then used Immolate to blast the whole flock while putting Metallicize into play for longer-term stability. When all 3 birds came in with their multi-hit attacks, Flame Barrier Plus did the heavy lifting and turned their own pecs back on them, wiping the board in the enemy turn sequence. I left the fight back at full life thanks to Burning Blood, picked up 16 gold and a blood potion for Coffee Dripper insurance, and skipped another low-impact card reward. The second Act 2 hallway fight was Snake Plant, one of the nastier common enemies in the act. I opened on its debuff turn with Pommel Strike into Immolate Plus and Metallicize, then shifted into a defensive line once the plant answered with heavy triple attacks and Frail Weak. Flame Barrier Plus was again the key stabilizer, punishing the multi-hit pattern and keeping the health loss contained. The fight was not clean, but it stayed under control, and Burning Blood recovered some of the damage at the end. I took 19 gold and skipped another reward that did not improve the core plan. The Act 2 shop was exactly what Coffee Dripper wanted to see. With almost 400 gold, I bought Meat on the Bone to add a powerful source of healing for any combat that ends below half health, then spent the rest of the meaningful bankroll on removing a strike to keep the deck tight. That combination gave the run both better sustain and better draw quality going into the elite section. Boss Room against Time Eater. Pantograph topped us off to full before the fight, so we walked in at 85 HP and immediately had to respect the card limit. The opening turns were all about discipline. Offering Plus bought the tempo to land Metallicize, Bash Plus and early chip damage, then Uppercut Plus and Corruption Plus turned the fight into a long-form resource battle instead of a panic sprint. Once Corruption was live, every skill draw mattered more. Free Defends, Shrug It Off, Flame Barrier Plus, and True Grit Plus let us spend turns balancing the Time Warp counter while still keeping enough energy for heavy hits. The middle of the fight was a real boss grind. Time Eater kept rotating between heavy attacks and slower setup turns, so the plan kept shifting between soaking hits with Flame Barrier lines and picking the exact right turns to attack. One especially strong stretch came when Corruption let us build Block for free, then pivot into Immolate Plus Headbutt, Inflame, and follow-up strikes without overcommitting cards. Later, when the boss crossed the halfway point, Time Eater reset to 228 HP, cleared debuffs, and got stronger, which forced the fight into a second phase. From there, it became a razor-thin damage race. We used Uppercut Plus to keep the incoming swings survivable, squeezed damage out of Pommel Strike Plus turns, and repeatedly checked whether the Blessing of the Forge and Duplication Potion were actually activating. Both potion calls kept timing out, so the fight had to be won the hard way, by reading the real board state every turn and never trusting an unverified potion effect. The finish was tense but clean. We came out of the big 39 damage hit with only 20 HP left, but Incense Burner gave us intangible for the critical closing turn. That one turn bought exactly enough room to stop playing safe and start playing for lethal. We chipped through Time Eater's block, forced it down into the low 20s, and then found the final Immolate Plus kill to end the boss at 38 HP remaining. That was the end of the run, an Act 3 victory. We never reached Act 4 because the Emerald Key never appeared on the Act 3 Elite path, so the Heart Route died before the final boss room. The climb still ended with a win, but it ended here, on the Time Eater's floor. This campfire was all about preparing for the Elite immediately ahead. Because Coffee Dripper had already shut off resting, the fire only offered utility, so I used it to smith Immolate. That choice pushed one of the deck's best tempo cards even higher, giving me a more reliable way to wipe out dangerous backline enemies and keep hallway fights from dragging on. I left the fire without the Ruby Key for now, betting that a later campfire would let me recall without sacrificing this immediate power spike. The forced Elite turned out to be Book of Stabbing, which is one of the nastier checks in Act 2 for a deck with several 2-cost cards. I opened with Inflame and early chip damage, then used Uppercut to cut into the book's multi-hit turns with Weak. The key stretch came in the middle of the fight. Flame Barrier and Carnage let me swing the race back in my favor, and once the book was low enough, I deliberately accepted dropping under half health because meat on the bone could pay that life back after the fight. The finish was ugly but effective, with block and reflected damage doing the last part of the job while the book kept stabbing into the barrier. The rewards were excellent. I took 33 gold, picked up Warpaint, added Blessing of the Forge to the potion belt, and chose Burning Pact from the card reward to give the deck a way to cycle faster and purge statuses. Warpaint also hit well, upgrading 1 Defend and 1 Flame Barrier. After the combat, the healing package kicked in and brought me back up to 48 HP. I took the merchant path after the Book of Stabbing fight to see if the extra gold could turn into one more piece of insurance before the back half of the act. The shop did not offer a great permanent pickup at this price point. The relics were out of range, card removal was too expensive, and the cards for sale were mostly side grades. Instead, I spent 75 gold on a duplication potion. That gives the run a flexible panic button for a boss or elite fight, whether it needs double Immolate for tempo, double Uppercut for control, or another explosive line entirely. The next room was a small chest. It paid out 23 gold in Dreamcatcher. The extra gold was welcome, but Dreamcatcher was mostly a dud because Coffee Dripper had already turned off resting for the run. I still took it, of course, but this was one of those moments where a treasure room technically improved the build, while not really changing the way the deck would play. The second elite was Gremlin Leader, which meant the fight would be decided by how quickly I could control the adds. Immolate immediately erased the opening minions and pushed real damage into the leader, but that first turn still cost health because the leader came out swinging. On the next cycle, I had to weather a particularly dangerous board with 2 sneaky gremlins and the leader all attacking together. That was the turn for Speed Potion plus Flame Barrier and Uppercut. The potion bought enough block to survive. Uppercut cut the leader's damage with Weak, and Flame Barrier plus Mercury Hourglass finished the minions off over the enemy turn and the start of the next player turn. Once the board was clear, the fight finally slowed down. The leader tried to take a buff turn, and that opened the window to end the combat with exact damage from Immolate and Carnage. The reward pile was strong again. I took 33 gold, picked up Centennial Puzzle, and chose Offering from the card reward. Offering is a major upgrade for this deck because it converts life into cards and energy on demand, which is exactly what a heavy Ironclad list wants before Champ and the rest of the climb. The post-fight healing left me at 50 HP. This campfire was where I finally committed to the Ruby Key. It was tempting to smith again, especially with Offering now in the deck, but the run still needed both remaining keys to reach the heart. I used the fire to recall and take the Ruby Key, accepting the short-term loss of another upgrade in exchange for keeping the Act 4 route alive. This hallway fight was Chosen and Cultist, which is a deceptively dangerous pairing, because the Cultist scales while the Chosen punishes skill-heavy turns. I opened by weakening the Chosen with Uppercut and using my cheaper attacks to keep pressure on the Cultist. The crucial second turn lined up beautifully. Immolate wiped out the Cultist and slammed the Chosen at the same time, and Carnage followed to leave the fight almost over before Hex could really become a problem. One more basic attack finished the Chosen before it could turn the fight into a mess of debuffs and dazed cards. The room paid 14 gold, another duplication potion, and a card reward. I took Seeing Red, which gives the deck another way to spike energy for its expensive turns. The question mark room was Wheel of Change, and the spin took a moment to resolve. When it finally landed, it hit the jackpot. prize that translated into Incense Burner, one of the strongest relics I could have found before a boss fight. Every 6th turn of Intangible can completely flip the texture of long combats, especially against something like Champ, where one enormous attack turn can otherwise end the run. This event was a massive win. The final hallway before Champ was Triple Cultist. I did not find Immolate in the opening hand, so I used Burning Pact to speed up the draw cycle, burned the weaker Flame Barrier, and focused one cultist down to prepare for the next turn. Once the deck turned over, seeing red gave me the extra energy to deploy Immolate, kill one cultist outright, and soften the other two while still putting up some block. The cleanup got a little clumsy at the end, but the important part was that the fight stayed controlled and I came out healthier than I went in thanks to the usual post-combat healing. The rewards were 17 gold, an energy potion, and a mediocre card reward. I kept the existing potion belt rather than forcing a swap, and I passed on the card reward because none of the options were worth taking into the Champ fight. The last campfire before Champ went into an offering upgrade. Upgrading it here was the clearest high-impact boss preparation available. More cards for the same zero-cost burst means a much better chance of finding the exact turn where strength, damage, block, and energy all line up together. With Ruby already secured, this fire could be used purely for fight quality, and Offering Plus was the best return on that opportunity. The Champ fight was the first truly long boss battle of the run, and it played exactly like a pacing test. Early on, I used Metallicize and Flame Barrier to absorb the opening attacks while chipping in safe damage. Offering Plus under an Incense Burner Intangible turn was the big swing in Phase 1. It let me see a huge chunk of the deck for almost no life cost. Then convert that into a strong Uppercut Carnage Pommel turn without spending a premium potion. The middle of the fight was about controlling when the phase transition happened. I tried to leave Champ just above half, but stacked Vulnerable pushed him under a little sooner than planned. Fortunately, the follow-up sequence still lined up well. On the Phase 2 buff turn, I reapplied Vulnerable with Bash and prepared for the execute cycle. Then, on another Incense Burner Intangible turn, I finally spent one Duplication Potion on Immolate Plus, adding Carnage behind it to carve the boss down to a manageable finish. From there, it was a matter of disciplined cleanup. Block the big hit, weaken the final attack, and finish the fight without panicking. The rewards were 99 gold, Corruption from the boss card reward, and Sozu from the boss relic chest. Corruption gives the deck a powerful Act 3 engine with its growing pile of skills, and Sozu was the least painful relic trade-off because the potion belt was already loaded with strong tools. Act 3 opened with the Repulsor and 2 Spikers. The first priority was the Repulsor, because letting it flood the deck with dazed cards is the easiest way for that fight to become miserable. I used Uppercut and Pommel Strike to bring it nearly to zero, then cleaned it up and accepted a small amount of damage from the Spikers while staying in control of the board. The fight slowed down once only the Spikers remained. On an Incense Burner turn, Intangible made their Thorn damage almost irrelevant, which was the perfect time to start cashing in attacks. I used Offering Plus to dig toward Corruption and other payoff cards, then spent the same turn's protection on Immolate and follow-up strikes to smash through both Spikers without losing much health to Retaliation. The room paid 13 gold, and I added Shrug It Off to the deck. That card becomes much more valuable now that Corruption is online, because it adds another cheap defensive cycle piece that can later become free. The second Act 3 hallway was Orb Walker, and this was the first fight where Corruption really showed what it could do. I opened by slamming Corruption immediately, then turned the formerly awkward hand into a solid defensive turn by converting Burning Pact and both defends into free exhaustible tools while still landing Bash. Once the engine was online, the fight effectively broke open. On the next cycle, I used the free skills to stack block, played Offering Plus to refill and add energy, and then chained Uppercut, Carnage, and Immolate together for a clean kill. The room paid 10 gold. I could not take the Dexterity Potion because Sozu had already shut off new potion pickups, and I chose Headbutt from the card rewards so the deck can start recurring its best turns more deliberately. The next question mark room turned into a Spire growth fight. This was a race, because once the Constrict stacks start climbing, even a healthy run can get strangled out of nowhere. I opened with a straightforward damage line using Immolate and basic attacks, then used Burning Pact and Headbutt to line up a second Immolate cycle, while the enemy spent a turn on its non-damaging debuff pattern. That bought just enough time to keep the Constrict manageable. Once the growth dropped low, I stopped trying to be fancy, and simply cashed in the vulnerable damage for lethal before the Constrict tax could spiral. The room paid 12 gold, and I took another Pommel Strike Plus, which gives the deck one more efficient attack that also helps it cycle. This hallway fight opened with one of Act 3's ugliest orb packs, 2 Exploders flanking a Repulsor and a Spiker. Mercury Hourglass shaved the whole room down before the first card was played, and Offering Plus immediately turned the opener into a burst turn by granting extra energy, fresh cards, and a layer of Intangible. That protection made the spiker's thorns almost irrelevant, so uppercut plus went into the spiker first, and immolate plus followed to detonate the entire board. Both exploders vanished. The spiker collapsed under the combined damage, and only a nearly dead repulsor remained. A final strike cleaned it up before the enemy formation ever had a meaningful turn. The reward screen offered a practical upgrade path rather than a flashy one. Ghostly Armor was taken over Wild Strike and Hemokinesis Plus, because this deck needs efficient, chunky defense for the Time Eater, and the Heart more than it needs another damage spike, especially with Corruption already in the list. The room also paid out 19 gold, and the game unexpectedly allowed a skill potion to be collected despite Sozu already being in the relic bar, so that potion went into the open slot. The left side mystery room turned out to be a treasure chest, which was the best possible result for the route. It cost no health, preserved all potion flexibility, and most importantly kept the path alive toward the upcoming elite where the emerald key still has to be claimed. The chest contained Captain's Wheel, and that relic was snapped up immediately. 18 block on turn 3 is a serious cushion in long boss fights, and an excellent safety net for both Time Eater and the Heart, especially in a deck that already wants to stretch fights with defensive powers and occasional corruption turns. This elite room turned into a long nemesis fight and immediately proved that the rote had paid off. Offering Plus found Corruption on the opening turn, which changed the entire texture of the combat. Corruption, Metallicize, and Inflame Plus all came down early, and that let the deck turn every later block card into a free exhaust tool while still scaling damage. Captain's Wheel arrived exactly on Nemesis's heavy attack turn, buying the space needed to pair Uppercut Plus with Flame Barrier Plus and keep the giant hit from becoming a disaster. From there, the fight became a matter of navigating the intangible turns without wasting premium attacks. Shrug It Off plus Burning Pact and repeated pommel strikes cycled through the deck while Kunai stacked extra dexterity. Nemesis kept slipping onto the one-hit cap at awkward moments, so the kill took several small follow-up swings instead of one dramatic finish, but the fight never quite got back out of control. The important downside was strategic rather than tactical. This was a normal elite, not the burning one. So the Emerald Key is still missing and the path has to keep chasing another elite deeper in Act 3. The rewards themselves were strong. Nunchaku joined the relic bar for extra burst potential in future attack turns. 26 gold came in, and the game once again displayed a potion reward despite Sozu. The potion did not actually populate the empty slot afterward, so it appears to be a reward screen quirk rather than a real pickup. The card reward was Body Slam, Fire Breathing Plus, or Searing Blow +1, and that was an easy skip because none of them improves the plan against Time Eater and the Heart more than keeping the deck lean. Coffee Dripper turned this campfire into a pure upgrade room, so there was never a healing decision to make. The only meaningful question was which card upgrade best sharpens the boss and Heartline while the Emerald Key Chase is still alive. Corruption won that argument easily. Bringing Corruption down from 3 energy to 2 makes it dramatically easier to deploy in real fights without surrendering the whole turn. And it raises the floor on every later defensive draw because the free skill engine comes online sooner. That is exactly the kind of upgrade this run wants at the end of Act 3. The Forced Shop ended up being more important than it first looked. With only 287 gold to work with, the question was whether to squeeze out a small efficiency gain through a card remove or cheap relic, or to spend almost everything on one piece that meaningfully changes the survival math of the final acts. Pantograph was the clear answer. Coffee Dripper means there's no resting safety valve left in the run, and Pantograph promises 25 healing at the start of boss fights. That means a full extra cushion before Time Eater, and if the key route succeeds, another 25 life right before the Heart after the brutal Act 4 elite fight. That kind of insurance is worth more here than a marginal deck trim. Nothing else in the shop came close to that impact. Apotheosis was tempting, but many key cards were already upgraded, and Warp Tongs supplies steady, random upgrades in combat anyway. Vajra and a Purge would have been respectable, but not game-changing. After Pantograph was purchased, the gold was too low for any meaningful follow-up, so the shop was left with 36 gold remaining. The treasure room kept the momentum going. The small chest paid out 24 gold and, more importantly, oddly smooth stone. That relic is a deceptively big pickup for this exact deck. Starting every combat with an extra dexterity quietly improves nearly every defensive card that matters here. Defend Stop Being Dead draws, Shrug It Off scales up, Flame Barrier gets sturdier, and the Corruption turns become even more efficient because every free skill blocks for more. With Captain's Wheel, Metallicize, Kunai, and now oddly smooth stone all working together, the defense package is starting to look much more like a real Heart deck. The mystery room was not a gift after all. It opened into a hallway fight against Repulsor, Exploder, and Spheric Guardian. The first turn still came together well. Pommel Strike Plus found Immolate Plus, and that immediately blew away both the Repulsor and the Exploder while stripping almost all of the Guardian's starting wall of block. Carnage followed to punch deeper into the Guardian while it was still hiding behind barricade instead of attacking. The cleanup was clumsier than the opener because the Guardian kept rebuilding its block total, so the fight slowed into a controlled two-turn grind instead of ending on the spot. Corruption Plus was deployed once the room narrowed to a single target. Burning Pact Plus and Headbutt were used to shape the next draw, and Mercury Hourglass quietly kept shaving the last points off. A final strike cleaned up the Guardian after the relic damage had brought it into range. The reward was worth the extra time. 20 gold came in, and the card choice was offering True Grit Plus or Bloodletting Plus. True Grit Plus was the best pickup by far. This deck already has enough explosion between Offering Plus, Corruption Plus, Immolate Plus, and the Strength Relics. What it benefits from more is a precise, reliable exhaust tool that also blocks. True Grit Plus does exactly that, and it becomes especially valuable later against burns, status cards, and awkward corruption hands. The next mystery room finally paid out as pure upside. Another small chest appeared instead of a fight or event, and it contained 26 gold plus Toy Ornithopter. That relic is more valuable here than it looks at first glance. The potion belt is still carrying several live consumables, and Pantograph has already made the run think hard about boss-to-boss survival. Toy Ornithopter means every potion can now pull double duty by solving an immediate combat problem and refunding 5 life at the same time. For a coffee dripper run trying to stretch all the way to the heart, that is real equity. The last hallway before the elite branch was a 3-jaw worm fight. It looked annoying for a moment because one worm came in attacking while the others were already braced to scale, but the draw solved it. Offering Plus opened the turn and produced exactly the kind of burst hand this deck wants. Immolate Plus, Carnage, multiple cheap attacks, and enough energy to spend them all. Immolate Plus crushed the whole formation at once. Carnage erased the attacking worm before it ever connected, and the remaining strikes plus pommel attacks cleaned up the 2 scaling worms over the next few clicks. It was not as elegant as the earlier orb clear, but it was still decisive, and most importantly, it preserved health going into the final elite route. The room paid 18 gold. The card reward was True Grit Plus Combust, or Blood for Blood Plus, and that was another skip. A second True Grit Plus would have been playable, but the deck is already dense enough and Time Eater still demands discipline. Once again, the reward screen also displayed a potion despite Sozu, and once again the potion did not actually fill the open slot after being selected, so the run continues to treat those potion rewards as UI noise rather than real gain. This was the decisive elite and the most important room left in the act, because it was the final chance to secure the Emerald Key. The elite rolled as Reptomancer. The opening hand did not support an immediate dagger wipe, so the fight began on a defensive line instead. Flame Barrier Plus, Ghostly Armor, and Uppercut Plus were used to blunt the first wave and set one dagger up to die on the retaliation damage. That bought the turn needed for the real swing. Incense Burner then lined up at exactly the right moment, turning Reptomancer's next attack cycle into an intangible turn. Offering Plus took advantage of that window. Corruption Plus and Metallicize came online. Burning Pact found Immolate Plus deleted both daggers in one shot before they could bury the deck in wounds. From there, the fight shifted into a boss duel. Bash and Headbutt Plus pushed a huge vulnerable hit through. Free Corruption block cards kept the damage under control. Flame Barrier Plus punished the big 30 damage turn, and Reptomancer was eventually reduced to a final sliver and finished off with one last strike plus. The strategic outcome was brutal. This elite also failed to offer the Emerald Key. That means the run can no longer reach Act 4, no matter what happens against Time Eater. The rewards themselves were still fine. Art of War was added to the relic bar, 30 gold came in, and the card reward of Immolate Body Slam or Sever Soul Plus was skipped. The reward screen also continued its Sozu-related potion glitch, so the displayed potion was not treated as a real pickup. The last hallway before the boss was the Maw, and it turned into a long but controlled resource test. The opening roar let 3 quick attacks go through for free, and proc kunai again. The next few turns alternated between small openings and bigger swings, so the fight became a balance between cashing vulnerable windows in for damage and not letting the Maw's scaling attack pattern spike too hard. Art of War and Metallicize both mattered here. Art of War bought an extra energy turn when the hand was weak, while Metallicize and repeated block cards kept the biggest Maw attacks from getting out of hand. Offering Plus was also worth spending, because Pantograph had already solved the upcoming boss heal, and the extra cards helped convert a non-damaging Maw turn into a near-kill turn. Once Mercury Hourglass had shaved the last few points away, a final Pommel Strike Plus ended the room cleanly. The fight cost some health, but not enough to matter strategically, because Pantograph will heal before Time Eater. The reward was 12 gold, and the card reward of Rage Plus, Armaments Plus, or Pommel Strike was skipped, to keep the deck lean for the boss. The potion reward again appeared despite Sosu, and was treated as non-real for the same reason as earlier rewards. The final campfire was another Force Smith because Coffee Dripper still prevented resting. With the heart route closed, the only question left was what gave the best edge against Time Eater. The answer was the second Flame Barrier. Upgrading the remaining basic Flame Barrier into another Flame Barrier Plus gives the deck a much cleaner answer to Time Eater's bigger attack cycles, especially the multi-hit turns where passive block and Thorn-style punishment matter more than raw front-loaded damage. Boss Room against Time Eater. Pantograph topped us off to full before the fight. So we walked in at 85 HP and immediately had to respect the card limit. The opening turns were all about discipline. Offering Plus bought the tempo to land Metallicize, Bash Plus and early chip damage, then Uppercut Plus and Corruption Plus turned the fight into a long-form resource battle instead of a panic sprint. Once Corruption was live, every skill draw mattered more. Free Defends, Shrug It Off, Flame Barrier Plus, and True Grit Plus let us spend turns balancing the Time Warp counter while still keeping enough energy for heavy hits. The middle of the fight was a real boss grind. Time Eater kept rotating between heavy attacks and slower setup turns, so the plan kept shifting between soaking hits with Flame Barrier lines and picking the exact right turns to attack. One especially strong stretch came when Corruption let us build Block for free, then pivot into Immolate plus Headbutt, Inflame, and follow-up strikes without overcommitting cards. Later, when the boss crossed the halfway point, Time Eater reset to 228 HP, cleared debuffs, and got stronger, which forced the fight into a second phase. From there, it became a razor-thin damage race. We used Uppercut Plus to keep the incoming swings survivable, squeezed damage out of Pommel Strike Plus turns, and repeatedly checked whether the Blessing of the Forge and Duplication Potion were actually activating. Both potion calls kept timing out, so the fight had to be won the hard way, by reading the real board state every turn and never trusting an unverified potion effect. The finish was tense but clean. We came out of the big 39 damage hit with only 20 HP left, but Incense Burner gave us intangible for the critical closing turn. That one turn bought exactly enough room to stop playing safe and start playing for lethal. We chipped through Time Eater's block, forced it down into the low 20s, and then found the final Immolate plus kill to end the boss at 38 HP remaining. That was the end of the run, an Act 3 victory. We never reached Act 4 because the Emerald Key never appeared on the Act 3 Elite path, so the Heart Route died before the final boss room. The climb still ended with a win, but it ended here, on the Time Eater's floor. Victory Room. After the Time Eater fell, the Spire Heart event appeared instead of an Act 4 path. The room is pure ending sequence, but it still lands like a final scene. First came the slow heartbeat in the empty chamber, then the prompt to attack. The strike connected for 738 damage, and the game answered with the reminder that this was not the true heart kill. The creature bled, but it kept beating. The ending text made the route failure explicit in its own way. All that damage, and still not enough to finish the source. The final prompt shifted from attack to sleep, and the run faded out on the note that a total of 4,922 damage had been dealt to the heart across attempts. From there, the game rolled into the victory screen with a score of 738. That closes the climb completely. The run ended as an Act 3 win, not a hard victory, because the missing Emerald Key cut off the real Act 4 route before it ever opened.